Good evening, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news this late Wednesday night. It was all going according to plan. This is exactly what we've been saying. Even Matt Gaetz and the rest of the crew knew the entire time that they were never going to unseat Kevin McCarthy. They were just playing the game, and they were emerging from this thing massive winners. I mean, it's not even close. Left-boyd heads are imploding, and when the left is suffering a collective meltdown at the future of the Republican House being extreme, when the leftist gaslighting efforts begin, you know that something good is probably happening. Well, that is exactly the case. Many people are arguing that Matt Gaetz lost. He tried and he tried and he tried, but he never stood a chance. And in the end, Kevin McCarthy. One media, of course, is trying to convince you of that. But it seems as though Matt Gaetz has a very different perspective on the events that transpired over the last week and maybe a couple of days. Matt Gaetz is now taking a victory lap, and he's quoted recently as saying, "I ran out of things that I could ask for." That pretty much tells you all that you need to know. So of course, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this massive W. All right, folks. Take a look at this. Here we have an article from the Gateway Pundit. Quote, "I ran out of things I could even imagine to ask for Representative Matt Gaetz on why he finally reversed course on McCarthy for House speakership." The suspense in the U.S. House of Representatives on Friday night was historic. At the end of the evening, Matt Gaetz held the cards, and he eventually conceded in his efforts to withhold the speakership from Kevin McCarthy. As the 14th vote progressed, you could see a change in McCarthy's demeanor when Representative Matt Gaetz didn't vote. Suddenly, you could see McCarthy come to realize that he needed Gaetz's vote. Panic ensued. The vote concluded, and McCarthy still did not have enough votes. McCarthy walked up and talked to Gaetz to no avail. And then fellow GOP Representative Mike Rogers got upset and started shouting at Gaetz, "You're finished," and had to be restrained. At this point, vote was called by the McCarthy backers to adjourn for the evening. McCarthy would try to do something over the weekend to win the speakership. But suddenly, Matt Gaetz got up and said something to McCarthy. Melania as Anana at CNN reported on these events. Finally, the House clerk announced for the 14th time that no one had the votes to be Speaker. Republicans moved to adjourn the chamber until Monday as the vote timer counted down. 218 Republicans had voted yes, a majority that would have sent McCarthy home for the weekend and left the House in paralysis at the hands of Gaetz and his allies. But with less than a minute left to go in the vote, Gaetz moved towards the front of the chamber, grabbing a red index card to change his vote on adjournment. Gaetz walked towards McCarthy and the two briefly exchanged words. McCarthy then raised his hands and yelled out one more as he triumphantly walked towards the front of the chamber to change his vote to. It was the GOP leader's final negotiation, capping an emotional roller coaster over the course of 4 days as he was held hostage by a narrow faction of his conference. Dozens of Republicans followed McCarthy and Gaetz to defeat the German measure, and McCarthy's victory at last was at hand. 6 Republican holdouts all voted present on the 15th ballot, giving McCarthy a 216 to 212 victory to end the longest speaker's race since 1859. Representative Tom Emmer, one of McCarthy's top deputies, went up and down the aisles telling Republicans on the House floor not to clap for Gaetz or Representative Lauren Boebert when they announced their votes, like they had for other holdouts, who had flipped for McCarthy earlier in that day. Asked why he reversed course on McCarthy, Gaetz said, quote, "I ran out of things that I could even imagine to ask for." McCarthy expressed relief as he left the floor. "I'm glad it's over. A truly historic series of events." And so if people tried to tell you that Matt Gaetz is the big loser in this whole thing, Matt Gaetz didn't only win, he won big. Quote, "He ran out of things that he could even imagine asking for." It doesn't get any better than that. And even on top of that, GOP neocon, Alabama clown, Mike Rogers has been totally exposed. And by the way, speaking of Mike Rogers, remember this? I mean, you better remember it is the 3rd time we play it. Well, there's been public information out there that Mike Rogers threatened to say he's gonna kick those of us off of any committees who dared to challenge the coronation of the Speaker. Mike Rogers, the neocon clown who threatened Republican holdouts with committee removal. Well, let's just say that threat didn't exactly end very well or age very well. Breaking: Mike Rogers has stepped down from House GOP Steering Committee after ballot roll. Rogers said the move would likely happen later this week and confirmed the plan on Monday morning. noting that his departure from the committee is not finalized and wasn't encouraged by fellow colleagues. He threatened other people with committee removal and then had to resign from his committee position in disgrace. You mean to tell me that Mike Rogers and Kevin McCarthy are the winners here? Absolutely not. Not only do they look bad, but they had to give over every single consent. Shouldn't every single thing that Matt Gaetz and the rest were looking at asking for, and most importantly, leadership accountability, Kevin McCarthy has to do what he promised, or a single member now can call a vote of no confidence and start a motion to have him removed from House speakership. Matt Gaetz is the winner here. I mean, absolutely based. He played them like a fiddle, and he got the job done. And he didn't get the job done for himself, because none of this really benefits Matt Gaetz. If anything, it's going to make him public enemy number one from the neocon unit party establishment and certainly one of the top enemies of the leftist mainstream media, but he secured this massive W for voters who want to see things happen, and boy, something good is happening. It's all going according to plan when left-boyd brains are imploding. I mentioned this earlier in the intro, but you mean to tell me that this is a massive loss for the Freedom Caucus for the America First agenda? I don't think so. Far left pundits are terrified of GOP House, complaining that the GOP will end Biden's failed policies and Biden spending and cost Hunter millions in legal fees. Okay, and let's see the problem here. Dave Jolie writes, with all the focus on the House rules being given away to the Freedom Caucus in all this development below may be the most consequential and House committee to attack and shred the federal government, undermining confidence in millions of Americans in our self-governance. George Stephanopoulos sounds the alarm over McCarthy's when it came with concessions to the most extreme members of his caucus, prospect of 2 more years of brinksmanship over his hold on the office, the fiscal security of the United States and the basic functions of governing, the fiscal security of the United States. It gives me more faith in the future fiscal security of the United States more than anything. The concessions that Matt Gaetz and crew were able to secure during these negotiation processes for the fiscal security. You absolute lunatic, George Stephanopoulos. What are you talking about? Democrats have plunged the nation into an inflation crisis with their irresponsible fiscal lunacy. The GOP establishment has essentially greenlit the whole project to destroy America's economy. And finally, America First patriots are standing in the way, and you mean to tell me that we should be fearful of fiscal responsibility and actual checks and balances and challenges to Biden's legislative and fiscal policy? You lunatic, these people are losing their minds fear-mongering because they won't be able to just spend money gunho trillions upon trillions of dollars buying votes in the next election cycle. Ilhan Omar complains far-right insurrectionists won over McCarthy during speaker battle. McCarthy just agreed to a deal with far-right insurrectionists that would hold the entire U.S. and global economy hostage to extreme cuts to everything from housing to education, healthcare, Social Security and Medicare. Hard to overstate how dangerous this is. Yes, how dangerous it is that the government is going to be spending less of your money. And honestly, if you want all these fancy programs that maybe run a more efficient government, then maybe stop spending money on gender studies in Sri Lanka or whatever the frig that was, whatever country and nonsense that was. Stopped spending tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine. Then maybe Republicans might be willing to have a conversation about reasonable social programs that help the most vulnerable in society. It's a win, folks. It's a big fat W if George Stephanopoulos is fear-mongering over it. If Ilhan Omar is using insurrectionists getting a win as her main argument as to why this is a bad thing, well, then it's probably not just a good thing, but a very Republican voters were asking for one thing with this House majority investigations. Well, you got those and an end to the reckless spending and the out-of-control Biden legislative agenda, and it seems as though you might be getting that as well. It seems as though Christmas might have came a little bit late this year. Because McCarthy doesn't have a choice. He has to govern properly. He has to stand in Biden's way, or it's only going to take one Republican holdout, one Republican representative, to call a vote of no confidence if he doesn't make good on his concessions on his promises. In other words, everything is going according to plan. It was a W, it was a win to take out Nancy Pelosi and finally end her reign over the House, but this takes the W to a whole other level. And then, this is some big news, absolutely amazing news. Share this everywhere. And it's very important for a number of reasons. The Republican Congress, led by Matt Gaetz as de facto Speaker of the House, But Kevin McCarthy has defunded the IRS and plans for 87,000 new employees for the next 10 years. So, according to the New York Times, the claims that 87,000 auditors were being hired is misleading. The 87,000 number refers to a May 2021 estimate from the Treasury Department of the total number of employees, not just auditors, the IRS proposes to hire over the next 10 years, with funding requested by Mr. Biden. Now, here's why this is so amazing. So if you look, Washington Post House Republicans vote to cut IRS budget, ABC News House Republicans passed legislation trying to block new IRS funding. We're blocking Yahoo Finance. Here's why defunding the IRS as the House GOP is first priority. So it has already happened. And they have voted to block the funding. House Republicans use first vote to get IRS funding boost. So here's something that you have to consider. Okay. City Journal: why the Democrats kept Trump's tax reform. Manhattan Institute: Democrats, for all their promises, didn't dare repeal the Trump's Trump tax cuts. Bloomberg: Trump tax cuts set to win staying power as Democrats dropped plans. They weren't going to cut Trump's tax cuts, even though they complained about deficit spending, and the deficit is close to $3 trillion in 2019. The deficit was $984 billion. Okay. So really quickly, if you look, not only in 2019 was the deficit $984 billion, prior to that it was $779 billion. But you look, ladies and gentlemen, and tax revenue, federal tax revenue increased all throughout Trump's administration as the tax cuts were implemented. Why? Because the economy grew under Trump, and when the economy grows, the federal government gets more tax revenue. We just had a recession. And we're going to have another recession. And whereas tax revenue has grown in 2021, that could be in large part because of $10 trillion pumped into the economy through fiscal and monetary stimulus. Okay, because our economy did contract for 2 quarters, but yesterday I did a lot of videos on the classified data that Biden potentially mishandled. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it ironic? Isn't that interesting? And nobody saw it. So I think that when there's breaking news like that, the robots go to CNN or Fox News, or the Robotic Pro, the AI program, let's just say algorithm, funnels people to CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or ABC News. I want to give you a little snapshot as to why Trump was infinitely better than Biden when it comes to the economy. Okay. In 2021, the deficit approached for $3 trillion. Okay. In 2020, it was over $3 trillion. Who pushed for the shutdown of the American economy? Was it Trump? Was it Matt Gaetz? Was it Trump Republicans? Or was it bureaucrats, media, Democrats and Democratic governors especially? Who was it? Was it Trump who said, "Oh, we have to shut"? So think about who caused all of this, what political side, and like I say, God bless you, Democrat, Republican, Socialist, Communist, God bless you. It doesn't matter who you are. Trump, Republican, Conservative, National Review, reading person, God bless you, it doesn't matter. You're watching this channel. I hope you have a beautiful and amazing and awesome day and week and month and year, and God bless you. However, look at what is taking place. And if you want to say, okay, let's blame these policies, this ideology, these viewpoints for what's taking place, or let's look at who is responsible for this. It's not Trump. It's not Trump Republicans. If you want to say, well, he mishandled this. And that's why we had to act in the most apoplectic manner known to mankind. That's one rebuttal. But they won't be hiring 87,000 agents. And the funding will be reduced, or the funding increase, I should say, won't take place in the manner Biden wants, because Democrats look at tax revenue. They look at government and taxes as how you grow society. And whereas Republicans or conservatives or another ideology says, hey, grow the economy, you need to grow the economy. Sure, government is involved in growing the economy. You have antitrust laws, fine. But you want economic growth. You don't want to pump the country full of 200 million barrels of strategic petroleum reserves because your energy policies were failed to begin with. So really quickly. In 2019, tax revenue was $3.46 trillion. It increased from 2016 to 2019. With Trump's tax cuts, tax revenue continued to increase. Okay, tax revenue continued to increase. There was not a time up until the last year in his presidency where tax revenue decreased a bit. And that was because of a tiny wealth from 3.46 trillion in 2019 3.42 trillion. But you shut down economic activity gleefully, and it was a choice. And yes, there was a gleeful, sinister element to that. Okay. There was. But the emphasis from the tax cuts that Biden and Democrats have not reversed, they have kept was economic growth. The economy we had. Household median incomes at record highs with Trump, a record low in poverty in 2019. And 2019, tax revenue had increased from 3.27 trillion in 2016 to 3.46 trillion in 2019. So tax revenue increased. And if you want to talk about tens of billions of dollars for endless military conflict, that is also a negative from, choosing Biden and Democrats in link can project embedded within the Democratic Party, but really quickly, you have a situation where you don't need a bloated or increased IRS. You need economic growth. With economic growth, you'll get the tax revenue. Okay? The higher taxes go, the less economic incentive for a lot of these businesses or corporations, because if they pay more taxes, they'll let workers go. That was the same thing with minimum wage battle, a lot like even Amazon and Walmart, other major corporations. Bernie Sanders thought that he was a lot smarter than these billionaires when it comes to making money. But the issue is that corporations, if you impose a certain minimum wage, then they cut staff, then they cut workers, then they cut hours. If you say, well, you have to give this the certain benefits, well then they cut hours for a number of their employees. Okay, you need a certain standard, fine, but at the same time, you should focus on economic growth. And so there were economic opportunity zones under Trump, and there was an emphasis on growing the economy. That's why every demographic group did better under Trump. Household median incomes were the highest ever under Trump. And then you could look at the chart and say, well, it went up even higher with Biden, but that's because of the $10 trillion in stimulus. That's not economic. We had a recession. Under Biden and they say, well, it's not a recession because the unemployment rate was low. The unemployment rate was back to where it was in the beginning of 2020. Why? Because Democrats in media and the apoplectic, hysterical, morally superior, highly educated liberals finally said, you can go back to work. That was a choice. Shutting down the economy was a choice, just like there's a whole bunch of choices, forcing people to do things. Because you think you're so correct. That there could be no other vantage point. We saw what's taking place. We saw what happened with Twitter and the Twitter files. And so you shut down economic activity, you're gonna ruin lives. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. If you're up for it, I'm gonna get back to work.